Hey everybody, it's me, Angela Walters. Welcome to this week's live chat. I'm super excited to spend the next few minutes talking to you about quilting stuff and also answering your questions live. If you are watching this live, go ahead and type your questions in the comments section because Jessica is here monitoring the chat, kicking off the spammers, and writing those questions down so I can address them for you. Plus, I have a giveaway just for the live watchers. So go ahead and leave your comments while you're thinking about it. I'll tell you what that is here in a second. And today I am so excited to kind of recap a previous challenge. Now, I know that I had mentioned that I may be announcing a brand new video series today. Couldn't get all my ducks in a row, but next week is the week. So next week's live chat, I'll definitely be telling you all about the brand new video series / class / free motion challenge quilting along coming out. And I'm so excited to show it to you. It's been the culmination of a lot of time and effort. But since I couldn't talk about that video series this week, I'm like, oh, what am I going to talk about? Well, I decided I would kind of recap the Help How Do I Quilt It Free Motion Challenge and give one lucky quilter or one lucky viewer a free panel. So let's get right to it. So the free motion challenge quilting alongs, I know if you've watched any of my chats, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But if you're new to this, thank you for popping in. The free motion challenge quilting along is really just a video series where we work through a technique. And I've done several, I don't even know how many I've done, a lot over the years. But the Help How Do I Quilt It challenge, which came out, I think it was 2019, was the first time I was able to design a custom fabric panel specifically for the class. So that was the first time I kind of learned how to design and write the class and do all that. So it's kind of has a near and dear place to my heart. But the great thing about all the video series is you can watch them at any time. So if you have just kind of stumbled onto this, you haven't tried machine quilting, that's gonna be a great option for you. So you can go check out all of those. So here is an example of the quilted panel. I'm going to show it to you, kind of some close-up pictures and just kind of give you an overview. So hopefully you want to check it out. And if you are interested, you can click the link in the description box or you can scan that QR code down there. When I designed the panel, I was thinking about how can I show some different design ideas for different types of blocks without making somebody take all the time to piece it. Now, I know out there's tons of you that love to piece, and I do too, but not as much as I love machine quilting. So when I laid out or started designing this panel, I wanted to look like patchwork and I kind of liked the rainbow colors. And so one lucky quilter is going to win the panel and the custom backing. So all you have to do, this is only while we're live, so Thursday at 3 p.m. If you're not watching this live, sorry, we've already given it away. Leave a comment telling me that you want it, and Jessica's going to pick a lucky winner at the end of the live chat. So one whole panel, and you know, if you don't want to machine quilt it, you have a cute little starter project for some piecing. But if you don't win, just for our live chat participants, we have a 20% off the Help How Do I Quilt It panel. So if you want to try it out, you can use that 20% promo code called HELP. There's a link in the description box. You can click that. That's only good for this week. So until the next live chat. So don't delay. Anyway, so another thing I did is when I was kind of pulling together all these resources, when I do the video series or that free motion challenge quilting along, I kind of make a free quilting diagrams for every week. Well, in the prior challenges or prior video series, I thought, you know what, maybe it'd be easier if I put all of them together in one document. So for this one, I went through and pulled all the weekly free quilting diagrams and put them all in one spot. So you can click the link to get that as well. And we'll see more about the free motion quilting diagrams when we talk about the next video series coming up. So I'm going to show the quilt. I'm going to talk about it here in just a second, but if you want to get some information, if you want to check out those free videos, all you have to do is scan the QR code or click the link in the description box. And I should pause and say, I won't be talking too much about the panel. So this is kind of like a ask me anything kind of live chat. So as you're watching, if you have any, general free motion quilting questions, you can ask me, or anything in general. Anything. If I don't know the answer, I'll just make something up. It's kind of like my skill. Anyway, let's check out the quilted panel here. So throughout the several videos of this series, I kind of tackled each row of the panel. So week 1 or video 1, I kind of talked about how do we quilt or suggestions for quilting 9 patch blocks or even plus blocks. And when I'm thinking about, when I'm looking at a quilt, I'm trying to decide how am I going to quilt this. there's a lot of things to kind of take into account. I'm really curious, like how big are the blocks? Because smaller blocks, are going to determine or dictate that I have to use slightly different designs. Also, what is the color placement? For instance, this 9 patch has 2 very contrasting, distinct colors. So doing 2 contrasting designs in that block just really kind of highlights that. I'm also asking myself, how well is it pieced? This is something I kind of joke about, but it is 100% true. I'm not the best machine quilter or best piecer in the world. And so if my piecing isn't quite where it should be, then maybe I don't have those lines coming to those points. Like I want to avoid that. So throughout the video series, we kind of see those different options. Now, what's fun about doing a challenge or a video series like this is we'll try difficult stuff if we can do it with other people, right? So watching the videos, joining in on the live chat, asking questions is a great way to, practice without feeling like you're all alone in this endeavor. So again, I have 2 different videos for that first week. It's the 9 patch and the plus block. We talk about how to use filler, how to use echoing to highlight your blocks, and just kind of having fun with it. I will say for all the blocks that are on this panel, or all the blocks that we might quilt, the 9 patches are pretty easy because it's basically a grid. I love having a grid to follow because I don't have to mark any registration lines. They're already right there. It just makes it nice and easy. Well, moving on from that, after the first week, then the second video came out and we talked about how to quilt triangles. Now, I kind of thought through the blocks and I tried to somewhat organize them in most common or most popular blocks to not as common. Squares are very common, triangles very common. And we saw, how can you use some dot-to-dot quilting in those areas? How can you progress from one triangle to the next, right? Because it's not just quilting one block. How do I work through that quilt? And I kind of show what I'm thinking about when I'm picking the designs for that area. So really kind of fun, whether it's curvy, continuous curve, a nice little feather, see if we can get a little shadow on there so you can see it, or even some dot-to-dot quilting. Now, when you're actually working on a quilt, you're probably not going to use all these different designs on it, but on the practice sampler, it's just a fun way to try some different ones. And then when you're done, you can hang it on the wall and have a cute little sampler of all your different block designs. Or if you don't love it, you can put it in the doggy bed. Either way. So that was the triangle section. Then the next video, we kind of moved on from that and we went to the pieced blocks. This one was a little bit more difficult to conceptualize for the class because pieced blocks is so vague. There's so many shapes and sizes of pieced blocks. But I just kind of talked about, how can we use the quilting to highlight portions of the block? So for instance, if I'm working on this particular block right here, and let's just use our imagination and pretend that this is the most important fabric in that block, how can I use the quilting to kind of wrap around and frame it? So again, kind of just being very aware of, what the designs are going to do. Some dot-to-dot, some geometric shapes. And when I'm planning these video series or kind of going through the designs, I know that we have so many different preferences out there, so many different skill levels, even different machines. So I try to include a range of designs. Not every quilting design is for every quilter. So for instance, if you were to look at this, you might think, I don't love anybody. Let's see how many times I can move it around so I can get it where it needs to go. Not everybody wants to do this dense, over the top quilting. I mean, I do because I like to quilt it to death and then add more. It's always been my motto. But you can make it as complex or as easy as you'd like. So I try to have some different skill ranges in there, some different, looks, just some different options. It's fun. I enjoy it because I'm easily bored, but easily distracted. So coming up with different designs is just always a great time. All right, and I'm going to try to move this big old quilt around. Next up, I just kicked something off. Hold on. Oh, I think it came back. Sorry, guys. That's the fun part about live. I'm, knocking into stuff. All right, then we went to star blocks. This was probably my favorite section to work with, just because there's so many options you can do with your, let me see how many times I can move this around. I can't even get it where it needs to go. But star blocks are a great option just because I have some different shapes to fill in. But then we also talked about, what kind of designs can we put around the blocks? Again, not that everybody is going to want to add all this detail, but you could just pull out the wishbones or you could pull out the geometric shapes. So it's kind of like a choose your own quilting adventure. Again, with the stars, I'm thinking a lot about fabric placement. That's very important because The fact of the matter is a star block is just a piece block. The main difference is that it wraps around a center point. And so that's just another aspect we have to take into account. This is actually a really good thing. With star blocks, if I have a design that may look a little basic or minimalist, once I wrap it around or continue it around that whole block, some secondary patterns will come out sometimes, and it's a really, really fun option. So again, piece block, but just a little bit of a different aspect to it. Then the next video, it's kind of fun to go back and look at this because I remember doing all this, and it's just kind of like, oh, seems like yesterday. Then we talk about pinwheel blocks and X blocks. Again, still piece blocks, but what makes these kind of unique are that they're larger triangles. So as opposed to the flying geese, half square triangles, we're dealing with bigger areas. And so that's going to, again, dictate some different designs that we can use. I talked about using echoing to highlight, the piecing or the shape of the block, or also combining different designs. Combining some geometric shapes with some curvy wishbone with some swirls, always a nice option. And then also when we talk about designs, I'm so afraid I'm going to kick this camera over. All right, how about this little guy right here? See if I can flatten it down. When you look at any design and you might think, oh, this is a fairly basic shape, right? It's just kind of like a pointy wishbone. But when I double it up in each block and rotate it around itself, then I get this more complex looking motif. So that's what's really, really fun about picking out quilting designs for your quilt. You can kind of pick and choose based on what it is you want to work with. And then lastly, the last video in the series, again, I'm trying not to hit everything. We talked about more complex blocks, and not complex as in difficult, but complex as in a lot of pieces, right? When you're looking at something that has different sizes and different shapes within that same block, that can be a little overwhelming, right? A little bit overwhelming to pick the designs. So through the video series, I talk, you can pull out the individual pieces, just kind of address each of those shapes as you normally would, or you could use the quilting to group them together, right? So maybe I want to build up that block and, have it a little bit more of a unit together and using the same design in all of it. So it's not so much just the designs I'm showing there. There's a lot of kind of what I'm thinking when I'm doing it. Not that that's the only thing you can think of, but sometimes it's just nice to hear the process. Sometimes it's, man, I just want to quilt a dot-to-dot design. Sometimes I feel like quilting a swirl, or sometimes there's a method to the madness behind it. So again, if you haven't had a chance to check out any of the previous video series, just put that on the floor. You can definitely do that by subscribing to my YouTube channel, checking out my YouTube page with all of them listed there, or you can go to my website, quiltingismytherapy.com. Now, like I said, I know that was kind of a quick rundown, but you've got to check out those videos and leave comments on them. Let me know what you think about them, because I get on there from time to time and answer those questions. All right, Jessica, do we have any questions? Again, be sure to join me next week, next Thursday at 3 p.m. Central, because that's when I'll be showing the new challenge. I'm super excited. All right, I do not have the confidence to end patterns or colors in the middle of a quilt. How can I confidently switch without bumps and uglies? Look, nobody likes bumps and uglies. That's not fun. All right, the transition from quilting to stopping to going back up is always going to have that little bit of a bobble. Think about driving a car. When you slow down and speed up, it's not the same speed, right? You're kind of ramping in and out. With practice, that gets easier. I know you don't really want to hear that answer. So let me tell you, I like to try really hard to end my design in a seam or a busy fabric, even if it's in the middle of the quilt, right? So if I have to, I'm going to try to get to a seam or a corner, and that's where I try to do that. But I will say, even if you have a bump and ugly, I'm gonna have to get a shirt. Nobody likes bumps and uglies. That's kind of funny. Would you wear it, Jessica? She would wear it. I love it. When you're 2 inches away from it, you can think, oh, everybody is gonna see this bump and ugly. But when you step back, I promise you won't. So try not to worry too much about it, which is easy for me to say, but the confidence will come after doing that a couple times and seeing like, oh yeah, it really isn't that bad. Hopefully that helps. I keep breaking needles. Ugh. Again and again, even when moving the fabric slowly. I have batik on the back and medium loft poly inside. Any idea what's wrong? Ooh, breaking needles, that shouldn't really happen just from quilting. Breaking thread, sure. If you're breaking needles, and it really depends on the situation, it's hard to say without knowing the details, I wonder if your machine might be slightly out of time and if the hook is hitting it. I wonder if you have any skip stitches. That's a sign of a machine being out of time. Another thing is if you are breaking needles and you're on a sewing machine and you're moving really slowly, that actually can be harder on the needle. Because as you're moving the fabric, if you're quilting slower, your needle is in the fabric longer, and so you're putting some tension on that. But really, they shouldn't break. They really shouldn't. So, that's crazy. Another thing I could suggest, I don't have any with me, I love the titanium coated top stitch needles. They are stronger to handle that, and they stay sharper longer. So you can try those if you want. Yikes. Yeah, no, I don't know. Usually when I hear of needles breaking, it's because we've hit a ruler or a bulky seam. The batik backing and the batting shouldn't have any play in that. Maybe if there was like a really bulky seam on the front, sometimes that can break a needle if it hits just right, but breaking needles again and again sounds like kind of a bigger problem. I hope you'll let me know if you figure that out. I'm kind of curious to see how that turns out. How would I quilt a pixel quilt? Oh my gosh, I remember those started kind of coming out. So pixel quilts represent pictorial things with just blocks of color. And so it's kind of like the further you step back, the overall look you get. But it's tricky because you have all those squares. So usually on a pixel quilt, I don't have any to show, but I'm gonna kind of step back and look at the flow of the lines. I don't wanna quilt, personally, I don't wanna quilt each block separate because I want that color movement. So I might do some big wavy lines that follow the color, or if it's supposed to look like a flower, I might do a flower design. The main thing is with a pixel quilt, to get the full effect, you have to stand way back. And if somebody's gonna stand way back anyway and not see the quilting, well, maybe you should do something a little bit easier for you. Hopefully that helps. All right, free motion quilting on a domestic. The last quilt I finished had a huge amount of unpieced area. I made a mess of that part. I have no idea how to start. Any suggestions? Unpieced area. So I'm wondering if there's like big just blocks of background negative space and a mess of that part. I don't know if like you're saying, oh, the quilting didn't turn out well. I will say when we look at big areas of background or negative space, whatever you want to call it, to me, I see all that space and I'm like, oh yeah, we're going to have fun with this. But I know it can be daunting because it's so overwhelming. I love to take chunks and fill them in, right? So break that bigger space up into smaller spaces. It depends on the quilt, of course, but can I pick a design that, you know, does some wavy lines and sections and fill them in? Can I add some blocks or echoing? But instead of looking at the whole space, just look around the blocks, kind of build out from there, and sometimes that helps get you going and started with it. The good news is if you have those big areas of unquilted or unpieced space, they're usually background, and so you could get away with doing an all-over filler kind of design and letting the blocks kind of pop up. And if you're worried about making a mess with it, using a thread color that blends into the quilt top will really help cover a multitude of quilting sins. So you'll have that nice texture, but you won't see every bump and ugly there. So hopefully that helps. It's hard to give you exact without a picture of the quilt, but just think in sections, kind of make your chunk, fill it in, and move on, especially on a sewing machine, because you're kind of dealing with this whole big quilt. You're just going to focus on that section and move on. Hopefully that helps. Do I tie off my threads and bury them, or is it okay just to stitch over the ends of a thread when running out of thread and starting again? I don't tie off my threads and I don't bury them because that's like a version of hell that I really don't want to endure. Now, I'm not a show quilter, so don't do what I say and expect to win a ribbon at a show, but I just take a few stitches in place and then cut the threads off even with the quilt. So if you run out of thread though, you run out of bobbin, you can't tie off, you can't make your little knot, I just overlap my next line of stitching by about a 1/2 inch. So if the thread ran out here, then I just kind of start 1/2 inch back and it just helps kind of secure that. Sometimes if my bobbin runs out and I'm pretty close to a seam or the edge of the quilt, I might rip out that little bit of quilting just so I can start in a little hidden area. But I find quilting ribbon candy difficult. What are your tips? Ribbon candy is a tricky design because it has a mirror image. So it's one of those that you think, I got it, I don't got it. I got it, I don't got it. The tip I will give you is you might feel like it will never click, but it will. And it clicks almost like that. So there are some designs like swirls that the more you work with it, the more you do it, the more you refine it, and it just kind of improves each time. I find that ribbon candy is kind of like, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it, and then it connects and you're like, oh, now I can do it. So that's the good news. Not gonna take as long as you might think. the best thing to do is to go find a quilting diagram. I have plenty on Ribbon Candy on my YouTube channel. Download those and draw over it. Draw it, draw it, draw it until you know how the design goes together. Then you can get on your sewing machine and kind of refine it. If you're quilting on a long arm, that can be tricky because sometimes we want to try to go left to right and down and over. Don't do that to yourself. Just go in one direction until you learn the design and then change up the direction. The best thing you can do though is drawing right over those lines, I promise. How do I get over being afraid of FMQ? If I could answer that in a sentence, if I could make a pill, I would be rich. Not like Taylor Swift rich, but kind of rich. I could, have some fun. But the thing about free motion quilting is it uses a different side of your brain than piecing. So what happens is when quilters come into this hobby, they're like, oh, I'm going to learn how to piece, and they learn how to cut and sew, and it's all precise, and they get those beautiful points. And then they decide, you know what, I'm going to learn how to machine quilt. And then I come along and I say crap like, just wing it, have fun, close enough is good enough. That's two very separate aspects. And most of us kind of lean towards one side or the other. Perfectionist, meticulous, wing it, fill it in, just go for it. And so getting to that point is just going to take practice. I know that just is so hard to say. When you're quilting and you're looking at your quilt and you're just afraid and you don't want to mess it up and you spent so much money and time on this quilt, I get it. I know that. Try to focus on the reason you made the quilt. All right, so like if you made that quilt top because you're going to finally frickin' keep one for yourself, think about that when you're quilting it. It's going to look great. I'm going to be able to put it on my bed. If it's for a charity, right? Think about the police person it's going to honor, the child it's going to comfort, the soldier it's going to serve. So I'm just saying focusing on that purpose will help you get through that, because really it can't go fulfill its purpose until it's quilted. Now, the saying, it's not a quilt until it's quilted. Notice they don't say anything about being bound. Just saying. Try to give yourself the grace and just say, you know what, I'm going to figure it out and have fun with it. The truth of the matter is, when you're learning something new, especially machine quilting, you're new, you go through the sea of suck, and then you've got it. And so you're going to have to go through that learning process. So try to enjoy that process and give yourself grace. I know some of you out there like, never mind, I'm just going to quilt by check. It's totally fine. You can pay your long armor quilter to do it for you. But if you're like, I really want to do this, I want to quilt my own quilts, I want to do the process from start to end, I can't encourage you enough to join us for a free motion challenge while it's going on, because you can work on it week by week. You can join us for the live chats. You can join the Facebook group and share pictures of your progress. It's doing that difficult thing with other people. So hopefully that helps. I wish I was there with you, because I'd give you a glass of wine, rub your shoulders, and we'd get going. But all right. Hey, we got a winner. Panel winner, Judy Groves. So Judy, you've won the Help How Do I Quilt It panel and the backing. All you have to do is contact us on our website or email us your address and we'll get it sent out to you. And everybody, I'm going to be back next week again, Thursday, 3 p.m. Central, for next week's live chat, and we'll talk about the next Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along. Well, until then, everybody, please stay safe, happy quilting, and I will see you next week.